Okay, Mishlei 10:8. Chacham lev yikach mitzvos ve'evil sefasayim yilavet. Would anyone like to translate everything except for the last word?
I can take a try at it.
Okay, go ahead.
Chacham lev is the wise of heart.
Yep.
Will take the commandments.
Okay, good.
And the fool, his lips will.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So the fool. So this is actually going to be evil sefasayim is what he's being called. So I like saying fool of the lips. Okay, not loops. Fool of the lips. Okay, fool of the lips. You could say one who has foolish lips. Now yilavet. The difficulty here is this is what you would call, I guess, a hapax legomenon. That's the fancy term that it's a word. So I think that the strict definition of hapax legomenon is like it only appears once in the entire book or in the entire canon. This term yilavet only appears 3 times in all of Tanakh. One here, one later on in Mishlei, and one in Hosea. Okay, so as a consequence, you have lots and lots and lots of like opinions and speculation about how to translate it. Okay, so what we're gonna do is like we usually do when we have something like this. We'll list the different translations. Okay, so let me just show you here. We'll go through our translations. For those who are here for the first time, the way our order of procedures is we read the pasuk, we translate it, get all the translations down, and then we work on the questions and the problems. We list all the questions and the problems, and then we try to come up with ideas, okay? And then we consult the Mefarshim. So right now we're in the translation phase. So Metzudas ציון says, Yilavet, inyan ayefus ukalashon v'chein, unless it's kishlon. I think it's kishlon, okay? So he says, full of lips will become weary, okay, or worn out. All right? So that's one. Sadi Gaon says, Chacham Hevel Yikabel es ha-mitzvos. Does that really say Hevel? Is that really what? Hold on. Or is that a typo on my part? Just give me 1 second. You've heard of a Freudian slip. This would be an ecclesiastical slip if it is one. Oh, I grabbed the wrong. Wait, where's my volume of Mishlei? Hold on just 1 second here. You know what? Yeah, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay. So Sa'di Gaon. It's possible. Oh, so that's still the wrong volume. This is not my morning Mishlei shiur. Hold on. Okay. 10. Sa'di Gaon translates it as. Oh, sorry. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, that's definitely Kohel's slip. Sosvi, I could have figured this out. Chacham Halev, not Hevel. Okay, but today we learned that if you rearrange the words in Halev, then you get Hevel, because anything that your heart desires is Hevel. Okay, anyway, Chacham Halev Yikabel es ha-mitzvos. The Chacham of heart, the wise of heart, will receive the mitzvos. Okay, so he changes it to receive. I don't know why he doesn't just go with lakach, but lakach seems more active. Yikabel seems to be more passive. Okay, the Evil Yosef yisbalbel vayhi navuch, and the fool of the lips will become confused. And perplexed. Okay, so that's how he takes it. Radically different, as you can see. So the Targum I couldn't actually figure out. If anyone knows Aramaic and can spot me on this, Dechakim libe yikabel pukdana. So that's the same as Sa'di Gaon, is one who's wise of heart will receive command. The sachla b'sivase, and one who is foolish in his lips, misached. Now I'm pretty sure misached means to rejoice, like vayichad yisro. But I'm not sure. So I if anyone can figure that out, then be my guest. I tried looking at them in Jastro and I didn't really have success. I don't think it means to be unified. Okay, I mean, unless that is a weird interpretation. Okay, then we got our English translations. Our scroll says the wise of heart will seize good deeds. Okay, I don't know why it translates mitzvos as good deeds, but the foolish one's lips will become weary. So that's basically taking it from the Metzudas David. So that's not new. Living Nach says the wise-hearted man accepts commandments. So maybe accepts is like the Targum and Sa'di Gaon, but the fool wearies his lips. And then alter says, the wise of heart takes commands, but he who speaks stupidly comes to grief. Yilavate is comes to grief. Okay, that's another interpretation. Few more translations here. Okay, bear with me. So Ibn Ezra on Hosea. Again, I mentioned that this is only found in Mishlei and Hosea. Ibn Ezra says, Milas Yilabet B'lashon Yishma'el Kimishtabish. So Ibn Ezra is going to be one of the Mefarshim who you'll see holds that Yilabet is Arabic. Okay, so he says it comes from Arabic, and that's why I guess it's not in the rest of Tanakh. So in Arabic means to become confused. Shelo yada ma lasos. He doesn't know what to do. Okay, ukamohu ve'elios of saim yilavet. And as it says, a fool of the lips will yilavet. So he learns it as to be confused, like Sa'di. Okay, so that's Ibn Ezra. Yosef Kimchi, that's the Radach's father, says chacham lev yikach mitzvos ma shi tzavehu chachamim yikach v'yaseh. That which, okay, so hold on, that's already an interpretation here. Let's just hide that for a second. Every Yosef Saim Yilavet, Ein Lo Doma Ben Mikra. So there's no other instance in Tanakh, Kim Ben Mishlei, except in Mishlei, which is 2 psukim later. Uvsifrei Treyasar, and in Hosea, V'am Lo Yavin Yilavet. V'hu Doma LaArabi B'shtei Lashonos. It is comparable to Arabic in 2 ways, in two meanings. Yilavet Ba, Kamo Yimaher. So Yimaher is another one, is he will be hasty. Okay, he will be quick. He'll waver back and forth between 2 options. And will not be the truth will not be clear to him. So that to me is like will become confused and perplexed. He'll be like maybe there's a better word for it, of like being caught between 2 options, but that's how he's taking it. And then the last one here is Radak says, this is on Hosea also, Amlo Yavin Yilabet, Yikashel, he will stumble, so stumble is another one. He will stumble, okay, like a michshol. V'yesh mefarshim yishtabish b'dato k'adam shelo yeda ma lasos u'mishtabish, so that he just quotes his father. Okay, fine. Alrighty. Okay, so that takes us through the translation part, and then Malbim says he'll toil without any benefit, but that's just like weary himself. Okay, so now that we've done the translation here, let us go to the questions here. Okay, so what are the questions we have to ask?
How can you compare Yikach Mitzvos with Yilabet?
Okay, so let's say what is the relationship, I'm going to just use the word relationship, between the taking mitzvos in the first half and the yilabet in the second half. Okay, I'll say, are these 2 opposites? If so, how? And you notice I changed my methodology rule, right? Because we found that shocking Radak last week or 2 weeks ago that says that the 2 halves don't have to be opposites, right? I still am going with my theory that like that they're opposites. So, but that's why I expanded. I assume that was Shmuel who asked the question. That's why I expanded it to what's the relationship between them? Is it a relationship of opposites? If so, how? If not, then what? Okay, good. Other questions?
How does heart go with, I mean, this is also going with opposites, but how does heart go with lips?
Okay, that's another good question. Good. Okay, so I guess let's ask the basic definition question first, right? So what is a chacham lev?
Wait, also, can we translate lev as not heart? Like
yes, good point. Right, okay, good. So heart in Hebrew means, could be translated as heart or mind. And here, I mean, I actually assume mind is probably better, right? Because it's wise, So, but we'll keep it vague right now. So, what is a chacham lev in this context? And then, what is an evil sifasayim? Okay, fool of lips in this context. And then Rivki's question, which is, why is the pasuk emphasizing lave versus sifasayim, right? Heart versus lips. Good.
What does it mean to take commandments?
What does it mean to yikach mitzvos? Take commandments. What verb or verbs would you expect it to say instead of take? Like, what are the more usual verbs?
Makabel.
Right. So you saw that they did a lot of the Mepharshim did change it to makabel, right? To receive, right? So we'll say, why not receive? Or what do you usually do with I mean, what other verbs do we use with commandments to talk about like person's relationship?
Observe them.
Yeah,
Follow.
okay, good. So receive, observe, obey, follow, do. And when just to clarify, when I say why not those things, I don't mean that we have to be able to answer why Shlomo said this and nothing else. I just mean like I'm trying to articulate the weirdness. Okay, that's a good methodology principle here. Is if something strikes you as weird, try to articulate the weirdness because that often leads to insights. Okay, what else?
It appears that translation B for Yelavate seems to be the easiest one to go by, mostly because Evan Ezra was actually from the Arabian world, so it would make sense that if it translated into Arabian, he'd at least understand.
Right, that is true. Yeah. So was Sa'di going? Yeah, I thought you were saying it makes more. You said that it makes most sense in the pasuk itself, though, right?
Well, making sense in the pasuk itself is a different problem.
Oh, that's what you were saying. All right, sorry, never mind. Yeah, but okay. What other questions are there here? I think we've got some more.
What does mitzvos mean? Is it
Yes. Okay.
like
Good.
the Torah,
This is gonna
or
be
is
big,
it?
right? Okay. What are mitzvos in this context? Okay. So one possibility is it mitzvos of the Torah? Okay. What would other possibilities be?
Commandments
least
from
one
someone
more.
else.
Yeah. Okay. Or general commandments from someone else, or what would be a contextually appropriate, not immediate context, but the fact that this is in Sefer Mishlei, mishleically contextually appropriate translation or explanation of mitzvos.
The mitzvos that Shlomo is imparting to you.
Okay, good. Or the quote unquote mitzvos, that Shlomo is teaching us in Mishlei, and he uses the term mitzvos a lot. Okay, like the famous Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh Torah simecha. Listen, my son, to the discipline of your father, and don't abandon the teaching of your mother. He always says kach, amarai, mitzvosai, etc. Follow my commandments and my instructions. Yeah. Okay, good. And this is going to be one where I feel like maybe that's going to be a crossroads type question where depending on what stance we take on that'll dictate everything else. Because that's really like the subject of this.
Wait, but I have a question for the last one. You said like he uses that a lot with
Yeah.
mitzvah. Wouldn't that be more like advice? Because I feel like mitzvah, that's a very strong word. Like I feel like commandment versus like personally, I just don't think of Mishlei as like commandments. Like
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And it is understood in the sense of advice, but I guess it's more like there's a fancy English word that bugs me because no one uses it outside of the context. But if you look at some English translations of Jewish texts, they'll translate mitzvah as precept. And I never actually looked at what precepts are, but I feel like precepts are kind of like good things that you are like instructed to, like good principles that you were instructed to follow. It's kind of like in between advice, which sounds like has like a particularized connotation, and like full-fledged commandments, which are like legal in their force. This is like principles of good living, that Shlomo is like urging us to follow. So I hear your question. I don't know other than the fact that he does use this term. So we can like rely on it for that the fact that he does use this.
I also think it kind of makes sense though, because when it says yikach as like the actual word, I think that kind of goes with saying like what you're talking about. Like you should be following that because it makes it seem more like a choice. Whereas I feel like if he was actually talking about like mitzvah, like from the Torah, that's not really a choice.
Okay. So that's a good question. So this I guess will bring us to another. We already asked it. Yeah. So this kind of depends on what does it mean to take the mitzvos, because if you could say that it's mitzvos of the Torah, but that a person could either take them or not take them, and depending on how you explain that, then that'll shed light on it. By the way, just because some people are new here, I think today. So the general approach we take to Mishlei is not about Torah. Okay. And this is really from Sa'dya Gaon, who learns that this is a book about how to make decisions in everyday life. And specifically how to make decisions to maximize pleasure and minimize pain in the world. Okay, that's like Sa'dya Gaon's whole thing. It's a pleasure, long-term pleasure manual, right? But there are Mefarshim who take it as Mishlei as a book about mitzvahs. So most famous of which would be Rashi. Vilna Gaon does this a lot. Malbim does this a lot. And then you have some people in the middle, like the Meiri, who will sometimes take this as a book of everyday advice and sometimes take it to be a commentary on mitzvahs. Okay, so that's like why I'm not inclined to just immediately assume that this is talking about mitzvos, like of the Torah, because we have not been learning that Mishlei is about Torah specifically. Okay, but it could be about Torah, and even if it is about Torah, it's also possible it's about Torah in a Sa'dya Gaon type way, where it's about how we relate to mitzvos, but not as halachic entities, but as like ways to get enjoyment out of life or to avoid pain and consequences. So just bearing that in mind methodologically here. Alrighty, are there other questions that we need to list?
Like a precept, it's general rule to regulate behavior.
Oh, good, thank you. Yeah, general rules for regular behavior, and that is a description of both Torah and Mishlei, right? Torah just does it as a legal system. Mishlei does it as not as rigid rules, but as decision-making principles.
What are we supposed to learn from this?
Good. Okay, good. I was waiting for some of that.
People will follow good rules, and someone who is a fool will either be confused, come to grief, or stumble.
Okay, good. So what is the practical application? Right. What I'll just put it in the way we usually ask this. Okay. What practical decision-making idea do we learn from this? And then the paired question here is, who is this? Who is the audience? Because if this is just describing, like Shmuel was saying, if this is just describing what a chacham does and what an avil does, so then great, congratulations. If you're a chacham, you're going to do this naturally, and if you're an avil, you're not. And if this is for the average person, so then I guess it's telling us you should take mitzvos, and not be. How do we translate this into practicality? Okay, that's going to be the ultimate question we have to ask, just like we do on every pasuk. Okay, I think that's basically it. By the way, just to point out, not to point out, never mind. Oh, what was the one thing I was going to point out? Just a second, you love 8. Oh, yeah, I meant to point this out way earlier when Ayala was translating the pasuk, and I said that Tefasayim is a qualification of the avil. Just to point out, just grammatically here, avil is singular and Yilaved is also singular. So it's not describing the actions his lips do, it's describing what he does. Maybe with his lips, maybe, just because he has lips, but yeah. Okay, so I think, unless anyone has more questions to add, I think we have our questions here. So now the question is like this. Now we have to kind of pick, and again, or I guess we don't have to pick, but I feel like this question here about what the mitzvos are, and then the question of the translation is, we didn't actually list that, right? Does Yilavet mean? Oh, sorry, Yilavet. Yeah, I've translated it right. Okay, what does Yilavet mean? And who cares? Okay, like what's the consequence? Right. So he's going to wear himself out. Does that mean that is the consequence the fact that he wears himself out? Is the consequence that he's going to be confused, or are there consequences from getting worn out and from being confused? If it's grief, what kind of grief? If it's hasty, then what is it even saying? If it's stumbling, how is that? You know what? I bet that he will stumble and comes to grief are kind of along the same line. So we can just add this here, and that way we can narrow it down to 4. So I feel like what we're going to have to do here is translate. We're going to have to pick a translation to work with, or pick what kind of mitzvahs we're talking about here. And when I say pick, I don't mean we have to commit to it, but I feel like that's gonna be something that we have to like contend with at the beginning, unless we just try to define chacham lev yikach mitzvos and forget about the second half, and then infer the ambiguous second half from the first half, like we've done in the past.
I
Hey,
think
Shlomo, can you answer that a question? Oh, sorry.
I'll go Naomi first, I think.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of like the approach that seems to make sense to me is yikach is as opposed to sfatayim, like action as opposed to speech. That's
Okay.
one thing. And then I was just wondering, what's the root of yilavet? Is it? I'm not sure, but is it like a fire that burns out? What? I don't know. Maybe
Oh, that's
you know.
interesting. Like labat ish.
I don't know. I don't spell in Hebrew well, so. I'm just
Okay, no,
guessing.
that's yeah. I mean, that is interesting. I mean, the fact that Ibn Ezra and Sa'di and Radak and his father all say that it's Arabic means that it's not that we might not find a Hebrew shorish for it. There's the fact that they're quoting an Arabic word might mean that it has no equivalent in the Hebrew language. I did have actually some other. I stocked away some other translations in case we needed them in the Meiri here. So let me just see if Meiri adds anything there. So he gives 4 translations here. He says, "Chacham lev yikach mitzvos." We're not giving his interpretation. This is just his translation. Pirush zlasib inyan yilabet echam me'arba inyanim. So he says there are 4 possibilities. Oh boy. Harishan minyan ivus. One is twisted. Okay. Klomar yisaves vis akel bedavarav. He's perverse and twisted in his words, corrupt in his words. Okay. That we didn't have, right? No. Okay. We got to add. Will be, I guess. I don't. Perverted has such a different connotation in English. Perverted in his words will be
distorted.
Yeah, distorted his words also sounds weird. It's like garbled, you know. Whatever. He will be twisty. I'll say twisty with his words. Okay, even though that's not good English. Sheni inyan mikshol. Second one is stumbling block. Klomer yikashel b'davar. He will stumble with his words, stumble in or with his words. That is, we saw, he will stumble in his words. That's C. Then we have shlishi lashon mehirus yosumidai. Very quicker than is normal. Klomer shi mahir b'inyan techef. That's almost an interpretation. I was not bargaining for that. He will be quick to express whatever comes to his mind, and he will not think into himself how to do it. Okay, oh no, he's prejudicing us. Okay, and then the last one is kumo poseach. That's like waffling. Klomer omid navuch bamashi yitzavi. He's going to interpret it for us. I don't want to read there. That's confused. Yeah, sorry. Donnie, what were you going to say?
No, nothing. I was just throwing the word.
Hey, Shlomo, I had a question.
Oh, sure. Yes.
So how is a lev yikach?
So I don't think it's the lave. Okay, you could say it's the lave the yikach, but then I don't know how you're going to read the other part of the thing. I think it's chacham lave yikach mitzvos. The wise of chacham lave yikach mitzvos.
So it's chacham lev. It's not the lev of the chacham.
I don't think it's the lave of the chacham. Yeah. And the only reason I'm saying that is because, first of all, chacham leiv is an expression, like in, like in Shemos, when the people who built the Mishkan, kol chacham leiv bachem, every wise of heart among you. And I also think that if you translated leiv as the subject of the pasuk, then I don't know how you would cram chacham in. The wise person, I guess you would say, then you have to say like the wise person, his heart takes mitzvos. It just gets a little bit more messy. So I think chacham leiv is a clear opposite to evil sefasayim.
It's a category, you're saying.
Right, it's category. And in other words, if you wanted to say that his heart takes the mitzvos, then the parallel would be that the lips are yilavate. And that's definitely not saying that because lips is plural and yilavate is singular. So I think smoother way is chacham leiv will take mitzvos and evil sefasayim will yilavate. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just
another question. Sorry.
No, Donnie, go ahead. I heard Donnie first.
Yeah, what's the difference between then chacham leiv versus chacham?
Right. Good question. Or evil sefasayim and evil.
Yeah.
And that's why I say also, what is a chacham leiv in this context and what is evil sefasayim? And I think that's why Rivki's question like pairs well with this, meaning, are we really just talking about a chacham and an evil, and then leiv and sefasayim are just being added there to like highlight a quality, or is this actually a different kind of personality? Like, is a chacham leiv different than a chacham, and a Nevi'il Sifasayim different than a Nevi'il? Those are two possibilities.
One
I have
other
a
potential question we could add
Yeah, sure.
is that was Yilaveit the only option he had to say this statement?
Yeah,
Meaning,
weird,
like,
right? I mean, it's
yeah.
so we face this in Mishlei elsewhere, where he uses an obscure term that our question was, couldn't he be clearer by using a non-ambiguous term? And this happens a lot in Mishlei, and we've had lots of methodology discussions about this. So I'll just like briefly recap it here. So, and then I'll show you why this might be a new case. So ordinarily we say that he wrote Mishlei to be learned on multiple levels, and we know that it's at least two levels. We know that he learned it to be interpreted literally and then also figuratively. Okay, now in this shiur we do it literally, but sometimes the reason why he uses an obscure term is because if there were only one layer of meaning, then he would use the more direct term. But because he wants to encompass multiple meanings, then he'll use an obscure term that has a dual application. So for example, there's a pasuk. There's not one that we did here, but there's a pasuk that refers to meat as zvachim. So zvachim literally means sacrifices, but it also means meat. So the question is, why didn't he just use the word meat? And the answer is because in the straightforward, in the surface level meaning, the pasuk is about meat, but then Rashi takes it as about sacrifices in the base of Mikdash. So he might use an ambiguous term for that reason. Now here, I don't know if it's for that reason, like he wants to incorporate a different idea, or if there was just no other term in the Hebrew language. We do know that languages evolve. Shlomo himself coins new terms that only appear in Mishlei, that don't appear in the Torah. Rambam in the in the introduction to the Sefer Mitzvos, talks about why he wrote the Mishnah Torah in Mishnaic Hebrew instead of biblical Hebrew, and he says because biblical Hebrew would be too restrictive of a vocabulary to use, and we need more words. So there could be a number of other reasons why he felt that this is the better term. So those are my two answers. Either the term is necessary for another meaning, and he could have used a more simple term, or this was just the only term that fit, and it happened to be like obscure or Arabic.
Is it possible that what triggered this thought was, I think Naomi asked about the shoresh. Like the word leiv does show up in Yilaveit.
Oh, good call. Yes, that's another type of consideration, is that this is a proverb and it's meant to be memorable. So he does use, not a lot, he uses puns, rhymes, like poetic meter, alliteration, weird syntax. So yeah, that I like a lot. That's actually the simplest reason why you'd use a weird term, Yilaveit and leiv. Yeah, nice. Got to be a visual.
Is there also added meaning to using like an Arabic word? Everything else is Hebrew, and then specifically using an Arabic word is not just for the meaning of the Arabic word, but it's also making a point about the Nevi'il Sifasayim, that the direction that they're taking is something to do with the Arabic world, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I think if I had greater evidence for the theory that he could have used a simpler word and didn't, then I'd be more inclined towards theories like that. But in other words, like that's already like a second tiered theory where my working assumption is he uses the terms based on the ideas he's trying to convey. And if there are other considerations that are also part of the idea, that's like another layer of like assumption we're making about him. So I'd rather not make those unless I'm forced to, It's possible, certainly possible. If for example, like one example I can think of here is that's along the lines of what you're saying is in Pirkei Avos, it says, Al tiu kavani hamasham es harav amanas lekabel pras ella. Okay, so whatever. Don't be like servants who serve their master in order to get pras. Okay, so pras is translated as a reward, but the Rambam in his commentary says that there's a difference between pras and sachar, or schar as people say, but sachar. Okay, so he says Rambam says we do have an idea of sachar. That's we use the term sachar and onesh. That's what we mean when we say reward and punishment. But pras Rabbi Zucker explained once that pros is related to the Greek word for that is this common word for the English word prize. Okay, and it's specifically saying we don't like serve God to receive a prize. There I can see like an idea like that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying is like, according to the Rambam, the Mishnah is basically clarifying that there is a proper motive of our relationship to reward with the Jewish idea of reward. And then there's like this foreign idea of serving God for a prize, which is not part of our like, our lexicon of values, I just used a Greek word there because, like it's in the spirit of the question, but yeah. So my answer is like, if you can work on an idea like that, then great. But my mind doesn't leap there first. I'd rather assume that it's like something more intrinsic to the idea.
Can I ask a question about the mitzvos thing?
Yeah.
So I guess this is a methodological question. So we had these three options for what mitzvos could mean, right? Like maybe it means mitzvos from the Torah, maybe it means mitzvos from Shlomo, maybe it means like, just like a commandment that someone's giving you.
Yeah.
And I guess if I was picking something, I would maybe be inclined to like try and work with the commandment from a person because I feel like it's the most specific. And I guess my question is that like a reasonable step?
Most specific or the most general?
I actually kind of think it's the most specific, even though obviously there's a lot of different contexts where that could happen, because otherwise it's like things that are sort of just like generally good and could have a lot of different facets and instances.
Hold on, let me just think for a second. I'm still not sure what you mean. Like, just to articulate my question a little bit better, if it's just commandments in general from people, so Shlomo's commandments are much more specific than that, and the commandments of Torah, even though they're not from a person, they are also much more specific because they have a specific character, a specific number. So explain one more time what you mean when you say that it's more specific.
Yeah, okay, so maybe I'll backtrack a little bit from the word specific exactly, but I think it's sort of like the most like weird or surprising, like the least like, oh, this is just like a thing that's like a general, almost like a general stand-in for like things that are already good to do.
Right. I hear that. Yeah. And I'm also inclined towards that simply because there's no qualifications here of it in any way. And so like, striving for that universality. Actually, I don't know if you would say that the idea you were highlighting is universality. That's just how my mind was perceiving it. Might be a good move. Okay, so where are we now? we've bandied about a lot of translations and ideas here. I think we need to someone needs to take a firm stance. Who thinks they actually have either an idea for like half of it for the whole thing, and we'll go with whatever reading that person uses.
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking that, I think when Tamara was talking about this three alternative ways of looking at it,
yeah,
I was thinking that there's probably a way we can look at it where he's talking about all three.
Yeah, okay, good.
And I think it'll also encompass the first three translations we have for Yelavet.
Okay, good. You piqued my
so,
interest.
Yeah. So I was thinking like the idea of what it means to take commandments can be perceived very differently. I mean, and culturally it is perceived very differently. And if we just look at America for an example, taking commandments is not looked at kindly, right? We value freedom, we value independence. Right, yeah. I mean, you tell someone to, not to get political, but to wear a mask or to, follow certain rules, it can push the wrong button. So following commandments, some might say is a bad thing, and others might disagree. And so he's kind of setting the record, and he's saying those people who take commandments will have certain outcomes, and those outcomes will be they won't get as tired, right? Because there's kind of already a path laid out for them. They won't be as confused because they know what they're doing, and ultimately that'll lead to better results. Whereas a fool who avoids commandments for the sake of avoiding commandments will get tired because they're, so to speak, reinventing the wheel all the time.
Right.
They'll be confused because, they're just, instead of following pathways that are laid out for them, they're trying to figure it out from scratch. And that'll lead them to be to grief and stumbling.
Okay, that's a really good interpretation. Okay, so let me just restate that, make sure I understand it, and then we'll go through and see which questions this answers. So Zach is saying that this is talking about the way you relate to commandments in general, to being commanded, right? And you have someone who is willing to take them, and you have someone who is like resistant to them. Okay, and just to point out a little methodological move here, which we've made many times in Mishlei. You have, since this is a short pasuk, you do have the right to make inferences from one part of the pasuk to the other. So for example, what Zach is doing is he's saying the chacham lev takes mitzvos, but the avil doesn't take mitzvos. That's just implied. And then the avil is yilavet, becomes worn out, confused, will stumble, but the chacham is not. So he's just like, taking each half and applying to the other. So how so? So if you are willing to submit yourself to a system of mitzvos, and again, I think your mitzvos could either be, in halacha, it could be in terms of guidance, it could even be in terms of like, let's say you're learning a particular skill, like a musical instrument or a sport or a technique, or it could be the law, it could be anything that is set forth as like, you must do this, either intrinsically or like you must do this in order to get this result. If you are someone who is willing to do that, so it's going to pave the way for you and make things more efficient because you're following a defined like course of action or avoiding a defined parameters of action. It's going to lead to a certain clarity because you're not going to have to worry about the confusion and perplexity, either intellectual or psychological or emotional, that like that you would fall into if you were just like operating on your own, and then if it's good mitzvos. I think this last one has to be like good mitzvos.
Can I add a point to that?
Sure.
I was gonna throw in one point about the word take versus accept. So I think he uses that word on purpose because he's not saying that you're a person who anyone can order around.
Right.
He's saying that you're not rejecting good commandments just because they're a commandment.
Okay, good.
So you choose and you take the commandments that you're following.
Yeah, and I think actually,
can I also say something on that also?
Well, yeah, sure, go ahead.
It's funny. I don't know if I'm saying similar to Zach, but maybe you could say that like why use the term yikach? I mean, maybe you could say that like yikach just mean it could also mean you're taking the commandments, like you're comprehending what's going on and you're analyzing the situation, versus the fool.
Okay, so I think that is a good interpretation, but I think that's different than the track that Zach was taking. Or at least I think it's going to lead us differently because I think Zach's talking about the emphasis, according to Zach, is, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, but is the like the disposition that you are willing to take the mitzvos, and secondarily you're going to assess them and analyze them and make sure that they're not crazy. And I think that's just implied in the fact that this is a chacham lev, that like we're not talking about a simpleton here. We're talking about someone who is already a thinker in some sense, even though we haven't defined what it is. I think that person taking it is what the pasuk is praising. Yeah, Leslie? Or who spoke? Leslie's name is lighting up. So, okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
On this interpretation, how do you define then like the fool of the lips?
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's a good question. I want to give an example though of this first half that came to mind when Zach was talking. So this is an example. You can come up with many examples of this, okay? But this was a vivid example of mine where I'm trying to think when this was. I was coming, I don't even know when it was. It must have been close to the summer because it was very hot. And I was coming back from the city, and there were these like these non-Jewish girls that looked to be about like maybe 14 or 15 talking with each other like across from me. And they were basically talking about all of their like boy troubles, but we're not talking about like he like boy troubles. We're talking about like so-and-so is like cheating on so-and-so with so-and-so, and like so-and-so got pregnant and so-and-so is like this, and like not just drama, but like drama with real world life-changing consequences of like births, maybe deaths, lots of stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, and I remember this was in the summer, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I teach girls in high school who are the same age, right? And let's say you have two people who are exactly the same in their intellect and in their personality, but one is in the framework of halacha and one is just out on her own in American society, So I was thinking to myself, like, the girls who I teach are simply not in these circumstances, not because they're more perfected and not because they're smarter and not because their personalities are more refined, but because halacha, just the halachic system of like, not, sleeping around when you're 13 or 14 and not, and the way that people dress and like the ideals of like kedusha, all of this stuff, just because of the mitzvos, that's like the default that they're in. So I'm not saying that Jews can't get into these issues. What I'm saying is that it's not the norm and that it's not stemming from like deeply seated perfections that my students have over these like 15-year-old girls. No, I'm sure if you swap them in the cribs, like, like at birth, then they would all turn out the other way, but it's like the mitzvos have this like path that they're kept on that keeps them from stumbling and getting perplexed. And again, I'm not saying that means the mitzvos solve all your problems. I'm not saying that mitzvos don't lead to other problems, but just fleshing out Zach's idea here that there will be certain confusions and weariness and stumbling that you will be saved from when you listen to any good mitzvos. And again, I'm not even talking in halacha, right? Same thing if you follow the advice of like a good master in any art, it'll keep you away from certain mistakes, and you don't have to, like you said, like keep reinventing the wheel. And eventually, and remember the in most arts, then the mitzvos are really just a starting point. Like my English students, I know I quote this all the time for English, but I quote it in Mishlei also. Bruce Lee's principle was that there are 3 stages in an art: is learn the rules, master the rules, dissolve the rules. Learn the rules, meaning that, let's say in martial arts, if you don't know how to punch, don't just keep trying it in different ways until you break all your fingers. No, there are like people who tried figuring out punches before you and they came up with rules about how to punch. So learn that, then master it, and then you can see when you can break free from that and have like your own way of thinking in your own application. But it's after you've internalized all of the good principles that have been established by people in previous generations who knew what they were doing and who got to test out all these things, Okay, so that's the first half. Now, second half, Leah has a good question, which is, just to tell me, Leah, if this is your question. Okay, I understand the Yilav Evil and Yilavate part, okay, that he's going to become worn out, he's going to become confused and stumble. But why put the emphasis on the lips? Was that your question?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, and we understand why the Chacham's emphasis is on the mind, or on the heart. Really, I think heart actually works better for Zach's interpretation here, because we're talking about like an emotional disposition here. Like he's willing to have his heart guided by principles and not just saying like, well, it's my heart, I can do whatever I want with it, or whatever.
Although potentially to expand Leia's question a little bit, you could you could say that if you took out the heart and the lips and you just said a wise man is willing to take commandments and a fool isn't, or a fool leads to grief, whatever, that statement would still encompass the idea that I was suggesting. So there's probably another element that comes from the heart and the lips being added.
Yeah. Okay, good. I accept that. I just want to see if
Rabbi, may I inject a thought, please?
Sure.
So the Gemara says, Im Chacham ein lo zoken yesha. So if there's no Chacham around, there's an elder around, and he can give you advice. So speaking from old parlineage, they say that the empty wagon rattles the loudest.
I like that. I haven't heard the wagon one. I've heard like marble and bottle and like box, but yeah, go ahead.
The empty wagon rattles the loudest. So over here, when you have a fool that is mouthing off.
Yeah.
So the reason why, if you ever notice, sometimes there's people that talk a lot to cover up their deficit.
Right.
So if you have a fool that's talking a lot because he hasn't mastered anything, so he will come to fail. So a lot of times a chacham yikach, he'll chacham le yikach, because he'll sit back and he'll accept wisdom. He'll listen to others, just like you said by Bruce Lee. He'll listen to others. But an avel, a guy that's a fool, he thinks he knows it all. So he'll rattle off as much as he can, but any person with eyes in their head will notice that he's a fool. And you'll notice in life a lot of people that talk a lot, like I'm doing right now, don't really know what they're talking about.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, Leslie. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that I think that is. Are you taking a different approach than we've been taking now, or are you trying to explain the role of the lips in the approach we've been taking?
I'm trying to explain why the lips come in altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, over here you're talking about mitzvos, and now you're talking about we're not talking about lip service.
Right.
We're trying to find out what the lips have to do with the failure of the fool.
Right.
Right. So that's how lips cause a fool to fail, because they think they know everything, and you can't teach him anything. As opposed to a chacham, yikach, he's going to take it. He's listening. He wants to learn. He knows he doesn't know everything. So a person who knows he doesn't know everything is willing to hear things. But a fool, he's not willing to admit he doesn't know something. So they won't learn. They talk a good game, but they don't know how to learn.
Yeah. So again, I agree with what you're saying. I think the reason why it's bothering me as applied to this interpretation of the pasuk is, in this interpretation of the pasuk, I do feel like the essence is the fool's unwillingness to submit to accept mitzvos, and the speech is going to be a symptom of that same quality. But I don't feel like the speech is so important that it should be elevated to the point where the pasuk mentions it specifically. Like the fact that it's calling him an Ev Yosef Asayim, to me indicates like a primacy of the speech in this idea, and I'm not seeing that primacy yet. Even the way that you're explaining it. Even though I think the ideas are true.
Can I just? Well, I think that Chacham Leiv actually works out from the example you give from the Torah, in terms of Chacham Leiv meaning like someone who's skilled at something, who's gifted, who basically gets there by starting with the whole model you set up. There's a methodology, and you learn, and then you perfect it, and then so all the people you look at in the world that are the best at what they do, what are the ones that are the gifts of artisans, craftsmen, they didn't just reinvent the wheel. They started by following the rules and directions and building on it and learning from it, which seems to be the Chacham Leiv. At least, I think that works out nicely for why it's Chacham Leiv, not just Chacham.
That's a good point for the Chacham Leiv. Yeah, I like that.
Rabbi Shneimos?
Yes.
I think I may have an answer for Leia's question.
Sure.
Can you maybe say that the Siffatim could be maybe like I don't know if it's like a metaphor or whatever it is, but maybe like this in this full, they're acting a certain way, based off of her, lack of affiliation with the Torah or some commandments or whatever it is, maybe it just means that, just naturally she'll just coincidentally be affecting other people's lives as well. People will observe her, and if they're brought up with them, if they're in the same school together or whatever it is, it's just a part of the culture, and they're just spreading that type of idea to other people. Now my question is, like, I don't know why it would personally affect them so much. Why, I don't know if it'll make them more perplexed or what, or into more grief, but but I don't know if that's a point or not to bring up, but I don't know.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Maybe just to build off that, Ariel used the word like more, and maybe that is something like if we kind of combine that point with Leslie's point, like like, what's the difference between a fool and a fool who talks a lot?
Yeah.
And it might be that the fool who doesn't want to take commandments but stays silent might have a chance of learning. But the fool who isn't willing to stay silent and has to talk the whole time will never have an opportunity to hear, and therefore they're even more the fool.
So hold on. So then now, okay, can you leverage that into an answer for why the pasuk is highlighting the lips here?
He ends up talking out over other people's advice, and he ends up pretty much ignoring their teaching. He wasn't going to go and follow it in the first place, but if he would have heard it, maybe he could have taken it to heart. If he sees someone else lecturing about the wheel, he can maybe come up with it a bit faster.
Yeah, that's funny. I just like that imagery of like someone's lecturing about the wheel, and he goes, "I was like, well, I happen to know," he just like tries to take over. Yeah. I'm liking this approach of like the speech. Speech is definitely about like communicating to others, right? Like, or not communicating, but he's being heard by others, and I like introducing that dimension into the pasuk, because I do think that this person has a harmful effect on others. Yeah, go ahead.
Although to counter that specific point about the effect on others is none of our translations of Ilavet talk about others. They're just talking about himself.
Right. That's true. Except for the being twisty with his words, I would think he's talking about for other people. I'm not sure, but yeah.
You could say that the action is like, one replaces instead of the action of taking the mitzvot. It's like both of them want to take some action, but the one takes mitzvot, the other one speaks.
Right. Yeah, I definitely sense that as well, of like the action versus speech thing, and people speak when there's a vacuum of like action that they can do. I'm not seeing how to bring that idea home. Just in the interest of time, since we got about 13 minutes here until shiur is officially over, so I feel like we got like 90 or 95% of an idea here. I just want to take a quick detour to another interpretation of the pasuk, because this is what we came up with over the summer. And by the way, we're getting to the end of my summer trove of pasukim here, so we're going to be on our own in a little while. So I'm going to show you what we came up with over the summer, and then we'll at the end try to summarize the difference between the two approaches, and maybe just summarizing the difference between the two of them will help us to see this one better. Let me just share the other screen here. So I had in my notes that we did Rabbeinu Yona, okay, and Rivki and Penina, I don't know if either of you were there or if you'll remember, but feel free to jump in and remind me if I'm missing something here. So Rabbeinu Yona says like this, 8. Okay, he says like this. Chacham levi kach mitzvos. Okay, mechazer umachapes achrei ha-mitzvos. So what does it mean that the Chacham Lev will take mitzvos? He will seek out and search for after the mitzvos. V'gam ki lo higia chova liyado, and even when an obligation doesn't come into his hand, misbonin b'machshavosav eze haderech timsalo mitzvah mitzvah. He'll contemplate in his plans, what path can I have that would cause me to find a mitzvah. Kederech kechui machem devarim, like it says in Hosea, take principles with you. So we're saying, so what does it mean to take? So going back to what Rivki said initially about why it didn't seem to be, Rivki's question initially was like, if this is about the Torah's mitzvos, so then obviously he has to do them. So what is it adding? So Rabbeinu is answering that question, which is saying, not only does he, of course he'll do mitzvos when they come to him, but this is a person who is actually seeking out mitzvos, and even when he doesn't have the opportunity, and seeking how can he structure his life in a way where he'll get more mitzvos. Now we'll talk about what that means in a second and why that's a good thing. This is not just like the Chumrah of the Month Club that he's just like wants to be do everything, be as strict as he can. This is like doing actual mitzvos. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay, but ha'evil, the fool, who bal averos. This is a person who has done a lot of transgressions. Misasik b'chet biyadav uvisfasav. He's involved in transgression, sin with his hands, meaning his actions, and his lips. Velo dayo hamaaseh. And it's not enough to do the actions. Okay. V'zeh lemothes alav. This is an indication about him. Ki lo me'asher yitkafo hayetzer umeones hatava hu ose. That he's not doing it because he was overwhelmed by his desire or coerced by his lust. Okay, in other words, this guy, the fact that this guy talks about it means it's not just like he gave in and like ate a cheeseburger, or like he gave in and did something else that's wrong, and he gave into his desires. It's not like that. Rak ki hiskim libo. I assume this is Hagual, or like his disgusting heart, not Goel, Redeemer. He's basically like decided in his heart that there is no sin in, there's no harm in sins. Okay. But you'll see the opposite from the wise of heart. He will take mitzvos with his hands to do them, and not just with his lips. He will not glorify himself and praise himself. Ach yomar me'at v'yaseh harbe. There he quotes that. He'll do a little bit he'll do a lot. He'll say a little bit and do a lot. V'hoil, v'ha'avil nilbat bisfasav umodia avirosav. But the avil will be lovet yilabit with his lips and make known his transgressions. Now, what does yilabit mean? So he says yitapesh. That's another interpretation. He will be foolish. Okay. What does this footnote say? All right, fine. So he got it from that same pasuk that yilavet means something that is done without understanding. Pirush am lo yavin b'masav. The people who don't understand their actions, yimashich al tipshus, they'll be drawn towards foolishness, v'hatava and lust, ad yifredu im hazonos im hakadeshos, until they separate with the whores and prostitutes. That's the context in the Hosea. Okay, so what is he saying like this? So I think the idea is like this. I think this also actually, curiously enough, has to do with the same subject that Zach identified, which is what your relationship is with mitzvos. Okay, so I think but Rבינו is taking the interpretation in a different way. So in other words, like this: the fool basically treats a mitzvah as you telling me what to do and restricting my desires, so he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to be told what to do, and he doesn't want to change his actions. He is perfectly fine being involved in this stuff. But again, like Rבינו want to point out, it's not just that he was overcome by his inclination or his emotion. It's that he has decided in his mind that there is no harm in transgressions. So this is a key mistake, because what we hold, and again, like I said, this is a typically Shlomo HaMelech approach to mitzvos. Obviously we do mitzvos because God commands us, but Shlomo HaMelech wants to put the emphasis on how the mitzvos lead to the most enjoyable life in the long run, and the averos lead to consequences in the long run. So that's why in Mishlei, when, again, we've been through this before, but just to reiterate, when he says, don't steal, he doesn't say don't steal because it's unjust. He says don't steal because you're going to get caught, or he'll say, you should give tzedakah, not because like you're emulating God or because like you're being a nice person, but if you give tzedakah, then people will view you as a generous person, and then like they'll be willing to help you when you're in a situation of need. So he's giving selfish, pleasure-based reasons. Okay, so that's the orientation towards mitzvos that that Shlomo HaMelech advocates. So the avil basically is looking at these mitzvos and saying like, I don't want to change. I don't want to be told what to do. And there's no harm if I like disobey this, whereas the Chacham is not viewing mitzvos as an authoritative command. He's viewing mitzvos as an opportunity for some sort of like benefit, of whether it is a benefit that he's going to get from the physical world, whether it's a benefit that he's going to get from like his own personal development. That's why he's seeking out mitzvos as educational opportunities to like, practice, his, to develop in certain areas, because he knows that these are valuable tools. Like, again, like I might've referenced this before, but like I wrote, this, my only blog post I've ever written on sukkahs is called I Hate Sukkah. And it's about how much I hate the mitzvah of sukkah, and about how like, it's forcing me into a situation which is extremely uncomfortable, but the purpose of it is really good. So I hate it on an emotional level, but I realize that like being forced to sleep outside, being forced to realize what it must be like for people who can't sleep inside, voluntarily, being removed from my material comforts, recognizing that I'm a part of nature. All of these feelings are embedded in this mitzvah of sukkah, and it's a tremendous developmental opportunity. I hate it, but it's a tremendous developmental opportunity. And that's really how the Chacham is relating to, I'm not saying I'm a Chacham in mitzvos, I'm just saying like this one mitzvah, but that's how the Chacham is relating to mitzvos, is like, he not only will he not have this like childish, oh, you can't tell me what to do, or like stop, stop stifling my desires. Not only will he not have that, he will actively seek mitzvos as tools of his own development and self-improvement to actually like improve his life. Those are two like divergent attitudes towards mitzvos. So that's what I remember from the summer. Let me just actually see what we actually, just indulge me for 1 second here. I'm going to now consult the 4-sentence summary. Okay, see what I actually wrote down in my notes, and then we'll try to review at the end here. Okay, so what did I write down from the summer? So I don't even know if this is a full draft. So what I wrote is, I didn't title it even. The wise of heart is convinced that mitzvos are beneficial on a personal level. For this reason, not only will he do the mitzvos that he is obligated in, but he will actively seek out opportunities to do additional mitzvos. The same way, good analogy, the same way businessman will seize every opportunity to make a profit, right? It's not like he'll seize opportunities to make a profit, when someone tells him to. No, he's always looking for opportunities. The fool who only looks at the mitzvahs superficially will not recognize their true value, since he refuses to think into them. Not only will he routinely violate halacha, but he will even spout foolishness. Oh, Rabbeinu Yona had I was translating Rabbeinu Yona as spout foolishness, by bragging about his transgressions, revealing that his violations were not a result of being overpowered by his emotions, but are rooted in a corrupt value system which views the good as the opposite of the mitzvahs. Now, I don't even think that this has to do with like Torah mitzvahs specifically, even though like, again, it clearly does apply to Torah mitzvahs. Anytime you're in a situation where there are opportunities for development through exposing yourself to more mitzvahs, like let's say like you're an intern at a company. If you're a good intern, you might volunteer to take upon yourself additional tasks because you know that you're going to learn more about how the company or the business works from the inside out. That's yikach mitzvos. And Avil Sefasayim could be like, there are people who like, again, not to get political, right? But there are the people who don't want to wear masks because they don't believe it works or whatever. Then the people who like, the people who will go out and like preach the anti-mask doctrine and try to spread it to other people, and like that person has a different relationship with like the mitzvah, in that case, and that's like a foolish attitude because it's just reactionary, it's just reactionary towards not wanting to change his lifestyle, not really thinking about the consequences that come from this. So again, I think this is a different interpretation than what Zach was saying, but I think it boils down to the pasuk is about how you relate to mitzvos. Are you relating to it as a chacham where you view this as a valuable avenue to save you a lot of grief and stumbling and confusion, like Zach was saying, or like I'm saying, like to positively work on developing certain things? Or do you view it like an avil where you are reacting to the person who is imposing themselves on and limiting your freedom, but you're really just exposing yourself to a whole host of confusions and consequences and stumbling blocks, or you're spouting foolishness like Rabbeinu Yona was saying. Rabbeinu Yona is answering the lips question, saying you're creating an entire philosophy to justify your neglect of these mitzvos, and that's like making them into the opposite of what they are. They're really there to help you and to steer you away from harmful consequences, and you're like flaunting your violation as though it's something to be proud of, so I think our interpretations are not so far away, even though we're taking the psukim in slightly different directions.
I like the move that I think.
Oh no, Leah, your lips wore out. We can't hear you.
Step aside.
You can type it if you want. I heard I like to move that. Yeah, if you type it, I'll read it out. But yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, it's still really bad. It's still really bad.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any questions or answers or ideas? Because we're nearing the end of our official time slot. Again, I'll stay on as long as people have.
Yeah, I have an example.
Sure. Examples are good too.
I think that another just like push to take this as not just mitzvah, like from the Torah, is that I was really thinking like this is so applicable, especially I feel like when you're in a class, whether it be like high school, college, whatever, and you have a syllabus and the teacher specifically, like, I feel like you would definitely like this example. The teacher, so they specifically made that syllabus and they were really specific in it, saying like the rules and regulations, what the course is going to be, whatever. And if you actually read that syllabus, then you'll know like, okay, like this is what I have to do for the semester and this is what I'm going to accomplish. And I feel like I can already see like in a lot of my classes, there are people who like text on the group chat and they're like, oh my gosh, guys, like I didn't know this assignment was coming up, like blah, 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 whatever. And they are like talking about how like, oh, that's so annoying. Like she didn't say anything about it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's kind of obvious. Like, oh, if you looked at the syllabus, like you would know. And you're just like, yeah, you didn't.
Yeah. So that is a good example because like, I guess you can extend that to anything that has policies, you know, whether it's like an organization or a building or a contract or whatever, like, yeah, is like, you know, if these are actual policies, then like that means that it's in your best interest to know about them and to not. And I think the example you gave is the people who don't read the syllabus. It's not because they're reacting like the fool in like overt like casting off of this. It's just that why should I be bothered by this? It's just not relevant, you know. Now, truthfully, a lot of syllabi are not relevant. You know, has to be a good syllabus in order for it to actually be relevant. But I take your point. Yeah. Now that is a good point. Leah typed into the chat. Oh no, Leah didn't type into the chat. Someone else did. Okay, so Leah gave up.
I had a thought.
Yeah.
So I like the point you said, I think earlier on in your alternative explanation, you gave a kind of like an explanation of what a fool of the lips means. And you said that it's not someone who just acts foolish, but also feels the need to defend their foolishness.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I think that's like a great explanation. But then it led me to think, well, what is it about, what's the difference between just being foolish and defending it that causes these negative outcomes?
All right, good question.
And that led me to another thought, which is maybe the focus of his statement is not about taking commandments. Maybe the focus of his statement is about not defending your foolishness. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that might be as simple as the fact that it seems obvious that following commandments is good, right? We all know that there's a Torah, right? It's pretty clear that following commandments is good and not following commandments is bad. So this statement, I would think, is trying to tell us something that we didn't think about. And maybe what he's saying is that, you know, we're all going to be fools at some point or another. But there's a difference between just being a fool and not taking a commandment, and then being a fool of the lips and trying to defend your foolishness.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think that does fit very well, or that flows very well from what the Rביnu Yona was saying of like you said, we're all gonna be fools in some cases. There are people who either in instances or in entire areas of their life are just, they're overwhelmed by their emotions, like they can't resist the pull or whatever. But that doesn't mean that, but once you justify it by creating like a counter value system or like just bad mouthing the correct ideas, you know, that's like first of all, it's going to distance you even more from any possibility of having the good, but it also is a further level of just faking yourself out. And like, you know, it's like someone who can't stick, like we would say someone who can't stick to a diet and then says, oh, dieting's stupid. We just see through how how removed from reality that person is, you know? But people do it all the time when it comes to mitzvos. And again, not just like halachic mitzvos, but it could be like syllabus mitzvos also, you know? Yeah. Okay, let us officially stop here. And again, I'll stay on and take questions or comments for as long as people are on. But we'll stop here tonight so as to not hold people hostage. And I think this is a good pasuk. And again, it's a good pasuk where, again, whether you take this about mitzvos in general or about relationship to being commanded, I think the idea is the same, and I think the idea is useful in either case. You just got to apply it however you see fit. So
thank you, Rביnu.
Thank you. Thank you, Rביnu. And happy
Thank you.
anniversary.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
I'll stay on until this is
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Zach. Welcome to the shiur. I'm glad you were able to make it. You clearly contributed a lot.
Really, Shneus?
Yes.
Question about methodology. Does it really make sense to go through the generic questions every time? Like, what if this word next to that one and the equal and correspondence?
So here's the thing. You're asking that as a learner. I'm answering it as a teacher. Okay. Is that as a learner, there's no need to articulate that once it becomes automatic. But as a teacher, and especially as a teacher that I'm teaching, if this was just the same group that came every week, then I would stop writing the questions. But because we've gotten new people every single time, then I feel like writing it out reinforces that it's a good habit of mine to have. But yeah, like when I'm writing my own questions, I don't ask those questions anymore. Like I don't like make them do a thing, unless there's like a specific need to do it. Like, let's say we saw that a pasuk was completely incongruous. We actually had this morning in our morning shiur. And so there we asking the question, like, how are these opposites, is good because it does focus on our mind on the right avenue of thought to solve the problem. But yeah, there's no need to just write it for the sake of writing it.
Thank you. Shkaya, thank you very much.
Yep, my pleasure. All right. If there's nothing else, then I'll say goodnight.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Happy anniversary, Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Bye.